In this tutorial, we'll have a look at how the anchor point works. The anchor point is the point around which some transformations such as scale and rotation happen. Let's have a look at how it works. If I go and select the sun layer, and then press the letter A on the keyboard, that will reveal the anchor point. You'll see the anchor point also has two values, and these are measured in pixels as well. And these values tell you how far the center point of the object is, this point here, from the top left corner of the layer. Not from the top left corner of the composition, but the one of the layer. So if I zoom out, let me just use my scroll to zoom out. And let me actually set the rotation back to its default as well. So let's press Shift R, that will open up rotation as well. And I'm going to right click on it and reset. And I'm going to press Shift R again so that it disappears. Now the anchor point will tell us, like I said, how far the center point is, this point, from the top left corner, this point, of the layer. And this is measured in pixels as well. So the center point is 93.8 pixels away on the X and 93.8 pixels away on the Y. In fact, if you multiply these two numbers by 2, you'll work out how wide or tall the layer is. When you click and drag the anchor point value towards left or right, you'll see that the anchor point seems to stay in the same place, but the layer itself is changing position. If you think of it carefully, actually this is quite accurate. If I go and set this back to, let's say, 0 and 0, it looks like the layer itself is shifted, but really what happened is that the anchor point got shifted to the top left corner. So the anchor point is now on the top left corner of the layer. But because we haven't changed the position of the layer, it looks like the layer has shifted down. This was a little confusing for me as well when I first learned about the anchor point, but after a while it actually does make sense. If you think about it carefully, you are changing not the position of the layer. So if I go and press Shift P as well, so when I move the anchor point around, I'm not changing where the position of the layer is. Remember, the position of the layer is where the anchor point is based on the top left corner of the composition. I'm not changing that. I'm only changing where the layer's contents are based on the top left corner of the layer. So if I set the anchor point back to 0 and 0, you see that's where it's going to be. If I set the position of the layer to be 0 and 0 as well, it's now going to move the anchor point to the top left corner. Let's go press Shift / so I can see the top left corner. And if I set the position to be 0 and 0, that point now, the anchor point, is now set to be on the top left corner of the composition. Now, instead of changing the anchor point by using the numbers here, there's a tool made just for that, and that's called the pan behind or the anchor point tool, and that's this one here in the toolbar. If you go and click on this, Y is the shortcut. I can now go and click on the anchor point and move this anywhere I like. It can be anywhere inside the layer, or it can even be somewhere outside the layer, or it can even be somewhere outside the composition. Doesn't matter. And what happens when we move the anchor point around with this tool is that the position and the anchor point of the layer are changing at the same time. So if I go and move this around, have a look at these two values here. If I click and drag this, you see those two numbers are changing at the same time to make the layer appear as if it hasn't moved, but in fact it has. As you move the anchor point, you can hold down the Control key or Command key on the Mac, and you'll see this will snap to either the edges or the points or even the center point here as well. Or you can do this to snap the anchor point to the center or the edges of another layer as well, which we don't have now because we soloed the sun layer. But I can just place this anywhere I like now, let's say here. Now you may be asking to yourself, why would you want to do this? Why would you change the anchor point? Well, the whole point there is so that you can rotate or scale the layer around this point. Let me show you. If you press Shift R, so we see rotation as well, and then Shift S to reveal scale as well. If I rotate the layer now, you'll see it will rotate from around this anchor point. So if I just go and click and then drag, this is where the rotation is happening from now. Similarly, if I scale this layer, you see it's scaling away from that point, or scaling towards the point if I drag it towards left until it disappears. Whereas before, if I just move the anchor point back to the center, the rotation was happening from the center of the layer as well as the scale. So if I go to the scale or rotation here and then just change these, you see it's rotating from around itself. Same thing with the scale as well, it just scales from the center of it or away from the center like that. Whereas if you move the anchor point somewhere else, let's say I move the anchor point here, this for example is an easy way to create like a pendulum animation. So if I go to my rotation now and just animate this or move this gradually, you see that the sun looks like it's changing position as well as its rotation, where in fact it's only rotating only from a different anchor point. There's a really handy way of working with these tools at the top. Let me show you how that works. Let's say for example I had the selection tool. Most of these tools are what are called spring-loaded tools. So the reason why they're called spring-loaded is because let's say for example temporarily I want to switch to my anchor point tool before I move the layer around or rotate it, instead of just pressing Y or clicking on this to select the tool, I can press and hold down the Y key, and for as long as I have my Y key held down, it's activated my pan behind tool or the anchor point tool, and I can move this anywhere I like, let's say here, and then I let go of my mouse, and as soon as I let go of my Y key as well, that's going to switch back to my selection tool or the previously selected tool. And that's true for all the other tools as well. So if I press, let's say for example, W and hold it down, I now activated the rotation tool. I can click and rotate this around that anchor point. Then I let go of my mouse and let go of the W key as well. That switches back to my selection tool. So instead of just tapping the shortcut on the keyboard or selecting the tool at the top, you can press the key and hold it down and then do whatever you need to do. Let's say move the anchor point to here. Again, I can press Control as well now, or Command on the Mac, and that will snap. Then I can let go of my key, and let's say we want to rotate this now. I can press W and hold it down, and then click and drag this like that. Then I let go, and then let go of my W key. So the anchor point is really important when it comes to scaling or rotating the layer from around the point, which is different than the center of the layer.